Hello everyone, my name is William. I'm here to welcome you to Tech Tuesday at 2. We're here to provide students with the opportunity to learn and use all of the latest software and devices that you'll need to be successful here at OSU and beyond. Last month here we learned a little bit about Photoshop, some of the basic tools and some of the more advanced tools. If you missed one of our programs or just want a refresher, all of our previous programs can be found on YouTube or on the library's website by searching for just Tech Tuesday. Today's program is all about preventing common printing pitfalls and preparing your print jobs to be the best as they can, no matter what size, big and small. With us here today is the library's own Kevin Dyke, head of our Maps and Spatial Data Department here in the lower level. We'll take questions from the audience afterward, and if you're watching from outside on our live streams on Facebook or Twitter, you can submit questions on Twitter using the hashtag LibTech2s. Afterward, we'll draw for our prizes, including today's grand prize, which is a Canon mini photo printer. It's a Bluetooth printer that can connect to your phone. And we also have a few extra prizes here today because it's the last Tech Tuesday of the semester. If you have not filled out a prize entry form, which is that gray little slip, make sure you do so. And without further ado, here is Kevin.
All right, thanks very much, William. Thanks everybody for joining us here in person and online. I want to talk about poster design today. How do you prevent the dreaded, pixelated, blurry, nasty looking poster? The reason I'm here is that Maps and Spatial Data, located in the lower level, we are the location of our poster printer. So my department handles all of the poster printing that we offer here at the library. This is a relatively new service, so you may not have heard about it, but it's something that's available. And the reason it's now available is thanks to the generosity of the President's Fellows of the OSU Foundation. They provided initial grant funding that allowed the library to purchase our printer, and we are providing the staffing necessary to make it happen. So let's talk a little bit about the printer. I was going to show this let's just look at this glamorous video that HP created. Ooh. So that's extremely overwrought. It's a printer, but that's what our printer looks like. It's very cool. It's a printer that allows us to print up to 42 inches in width. So that's 3.5 feet wide. That's a pretty good size. Not the biggest one out there, but larger than your standard poster printer, which is usually about 36 inches. If you've ever submitted a poster to, say, an academic conference in particular, the common size for a long time, and it still is really probably the most common, is 36 inches by 48 inches, or 3 feet by 4 feet. So we can accommodate that easily. We can accommodate, so it's difficult to explain in text for some reason, but if you think about it, the only restriction on print size for our particular printer is that 42 inches wide, and that is literally the size of the paper that we're working with. So if you wanted to do something 42 inches by 100 inches, that's fine. If you really needed to do something that big, you can. And some posters, I know, in certain disciplines such as geography, you'll see conferences that have a maximum poster size of something like 96 inches, which is just, seems super huge to most people, but if you imagine using really detailed graphics, images, or maps where you need to reproduce at a certain level for it to be worthwhile, then you can understand the sort of sizes we're talking about. So that's something that we can accommodate. We'll talk a little bit, and we'll actually open up and mess around in PowerPoint a little bit, which is by far the most common piece of software used for poster design. It does have some size limitations, but again, for that 36 by 48 sort of common size, PowerPoint works perfectly, and there's no reason to avoid it. And so the way our printer works is that it will automatically rotate so that the dimensions fit on our paper, which is great. So you don't need to worry about which side is 42 inches or less, or indicate that or whatever. As long as one of your sides is within the necessary width of our printer, you're good to go. So that's very helpful. And then also, you don't need to worry about doing any trimming, cutting. That's something I'm aware of. At some print services require the people doing the printing to actually take care of the cutting themselves because they don't want to be responsible for the cutting involved. But our printer actually has integrated trimming on the vertical as well as horizontal axes, which means it gets trimmed as it comes out of the printer, which also allows us to save a lot of time. Small caveat, our vertical trimmer is actually not functioning at the moment, but I have a dedicated team of students who know how to meticulously trim posters using a high precision scalpel. They work with 150-year-old maps all the time, so your posters are in good hands with my students. So I've hinted at it a bit. I've talked a bit about the printer itself. I want to talk about the service that we're offering here in the library. So if you are part of the OSU community, and we mean that pretty broadly, so if you're a current OSU student, staff, faculty, postdoc, any other role where you are an active part of the OSU community, you have access to, for the time being, 2 free poster prints per semester. And that, in the way we calculate that, we include summer as a separate semester. So if you add that up, you'll see that means 6 free prints per academic year, which is an amazing bargain as far as poster printing goes. You can easily expect to spend $50, upwards of $100 for a poster print at your usual print shops. So we are providing a real money-saving service here for especially for our students and as well as our staff and faculty. For our print service, you have 2 options when it comes to the paper that you choose. Excuse me, I have a bit of a cold, that's why I'm just downing water here. There is a photo paper that has a sort of satiny finish to it, so it's not, it's obviously has a little more gloss to it than you see here, the plain bond paper. That's basically just gigantic copy paper, printer paper. So the vast majority of our posters are printed on the satin photo paper, and it looks amazing. Photographs reproduce really well, graphics look crisp and sharp, but the glare is not so bad that if you're, say, at an academic conference and you're in a hall with perhaps not the best overhead lighting, you don't have to worry about glare making your poster totally unreadable. The satin finish works really well in a variety of different lighting situations. And then the plain paper is great if you want to create something that you want people to interact with. So if you want someone to be able to draw, for some reason I always think of maps, I don't know why that is. Think about printing out a map that's 4 foot by 3 feet, and you want people to circle or color in or mark up where they are from or just write on the map itself. That's where the plain paper would be really great because you can draw on that and work on that like anything else. The photo paper is not something you can really write on unless you use a permanent marker, and that's always a bit frightening. We have a turnaround time of 2 days when submitting your job, if you get it in to us, and I'll talk a bit about how the actual submission process works. You submit your job on, for example, Monday at 1 p.m. It will be ready by Wednesday at 1 p.m. And that is our guideline. That's our stated turnaround time. Now, depending on the time of semester, it might be much sooner than that. It might be that we get it done within an hour of you submitting it, but it could also mean that if it's towards the end of the semester or at a peak symposium or conference season where we have 50 requests in our queue, it might actually take longer than those 2 days. So we encourage people to just submit as soon as you find, as soon as your poster is ready to print. Don't hesitate to get that submitted, because we complete the orders in terms of when they're received. We can't reasonably prioritize someone who, it's just like if you show up at the airport, you can't just say, well, my flight's sooner than these people, can I just get in front of you or whatever. Although I feel like that's how it should be with airports. That's not how it's going to be with poster printing, okay? So just plan ahead. I will say most printing services offer a similar turnaround time. It can, and if you can get it same day, it will be very expensive. So give yourself at least 2 days, preferably 3 days with our service when you submit your job. There's a link there to all the guidelines, all the information, as well as as a link to a form that you'll fill out. You'll submit your file using a Google form. So if you use Gmail through your OSU account, you can use that. If you don't, you'll just need to use a personal Gmail account, and then just be sure to include your OSU email address, because that's how we ensure that someone is actually affiliated with OSU. And that might be subject to change in terms of how we manage that. Okay, so that's sort of the logistics. That's the service, that's the printer. Now I want to talk a little bit about, well, how do you actually put a poster together? What are just some very general guidelines? I'm not even going to get into content necessarily. I'm going to talk about how can you make a poster that has legible content. So how do you make sure your font sizes are big enough? How do you select fonts? And then how do you select images and other graphics? How do you make sure that they will reproduce faithfully when you go to a large size, which it's a perilous journey. So designing a poster, especially for the first time, which is the case for a lot of especially undergraduates, but also early career grad students, are frequently thrown into poster design for conferences without any formal training or guidance necessarily. And so it can be daunting, but it doesn't have to feel that bad as long as you bear some guidelines in mind. And guidelines are a key word for what I'm saying, because I don't want you or anyone to necessarily listen to what I say and feel that you can't go beyond that or you can't do things differently. This is a really general set of guidelines, and honestly, being creative with poster design is a great idea, but it's just the question of making sure your design remains legible and functional. That's really, again, to bring up a sort of metaphor with mapping, cartography is very much an art form, making maps is an art form, but what distinguishes cartography from abstract art or any other form of art is that there's generally a use, there's a functionality requirement of a map, and that's the same with your poster. You can make it very clever and creative, but it still needs to be readable and very clear in terms of direction and how you guide your reader through viewing your poster. Okay, choosing fonts. Now this is really very exciting, fun stuff, but really the biggest thing when it comes to picking fonts for a poster is to show restraint. Stick with two fonts, that's all you need, trust me. One serifed, one sans serif. This is what a serifed font looks like. The biggest distinguishing characteristic are, if you look at that capital S at the start and the end of it, you see those little flourishes. A serif font has these little marks that have been scientifically shown to improve the legibility of a larger block of text. So when it comes to paragraphs, your abstract, your summary, anything that you'll be writing more than a dozen words in, you should be using a serifed font. A sans serif font tends to look cleaner. They become more popular recently just as a, for design. They take all sorts of shapes and forms, but you see they don't have the little marks on the edges. They have just the nice clean lines. And so for titles, headers, things like that, a sans serif font is a perfect choice. And there you see the two of them just compared, one on top of the other. And you can imagine the giant size. The size of these is somewhat exaggerated in terms of just presentation purposes, but that's another thing to just keep in mind when you're designing your poster, is that someone is not reading your poster. We'll get into it. I'll save that for later. I don't want to seem like I'm haranguing you about poster design here. So I already mentioned serif font, paragraphs, longer bits of text. Use your sans serif font for anything else. Sizing. This is where it's very easy to get caught up when you design a poster, because generally speaking, if you're designing a research poster, you have a whole lot of information that you want to share and that you feel very deeply about including on your poster. And if you have something that's 3 feet by 4 feet, you feel like, well, I can fit my whole paper on here. I'll just copy and paste everything on there. And you really need to try to avoid that. And the biggest, a good guideline for how you need to size your fonts is that it should be readable from 5 feet away. And so this is where it gets difficult when you're staring at a computer screen designing, because generally speaking, when you're designing a poster, you are not viewing it at 100% zoom. You're looking at it at a very much smaller bit, or just a tiny portion of your actual poster. So it can be very difficult to keep sight of the legibility of your fonts. But really, generally speaking, when in doubt, make it bigger. Just speaking from personal experience and anecdotally speaking with other people who have made posters, our impulse seems to be to use a smaller font size, but really it's important when you're thinking, like the size of the poster, and this is where test prints that I'll get into later are so important, because then you'll see, oh, this is what this actually looks like, and this is way too small, or this is perfectly, and honestly, I can't imagine there'll be many instances where you think, whoa, that is way too big of a font. If that happens to you, let me know, because I will be shocked. So here are just some general guidelines when it comes to sizing the different elements of your poster. Your title, minimum 60 points. It can be up to 90 points. It could be, if it's and this depends on the length of your title. If it's only a half a dozen words, which it probably won't be, but if it is a shorter title, you could make it 150 points, something like that. It needs to be large. It needs to be eye-catching. It needs to draw someone in, because that is what is visible from more than 5 feet away. 5 feet is reading distance. Your title needs to be big enough that you'll find someone from someone who's walking down the row of posters and drawing them in to look at yours further. So you want it to be big, and you want it to be as catchy as possible. And then your paragraph text, this is where people really get caught up, because 18 point might seem big, and for a paper, you're probably not going to get away with an 18-point font. But for a poster, I would say 30 points for a minimum size is what you need to work with. So there's generally a lot of editing that needs to be done to any text that you'll include. I've seen guidelines saying you should have a maximum of 500 words on a poster total. And that is a really small number to cover an entire research project. This is where people have really gotten clever lately, using things like QR codes, where you include a section at the bottom of your poster saying, for more information or to read the full paper, scan this QR code with your phone, and then link to either a publicly shared Google Doc or just a version of your paper that you've made publicly available on something like Dropbox, Google Drive, to let people actually read the full work. So like including that base level of interactivity is a way to it might make it easier for you to take things off of the poster if you know that someone can still get at it. And then your header should be somewhere in between those two, so that they clearly, so that you clearly create a sort of visual hierarchy. So your title is very clear, the biggest thing. Your paragraph text is obviously a paragraph, but then your headers should clearly serve as sort of the subdividing portions of your poster. So just for example, there's a title at 90, header at 55, and a paragraph at 30. So as I've discussed, this is really only useful in a relative sense, because looking at font sizes on a screen where I'm in full screen mode and it's being expanded, the actual size is not really worth anything. So that's, again, don't trust your screen when it comes to sizing. Test printing is really the only way to tell if you're on the right path. But relatively speaking, that gives you a look. Images. So if you're using something like PowerPoint, and we'll mess with this a little bit, if you drag an image into it or import an image or however you add your image into PowerPoint, resist the temptation to scale it to make it larger. Because whenever you drag it in, that initial size it has is its size. That is its full size. So if it's too small, you need to find a different picture if possible, or you just need to use it at that small size and maybe complement it with another graphic of some sort. And we'll talk a bit about where to find large, appropriately sized pictures for printing. A lot of what we find on the web. So if you're pulling a picture from a website, you need to make sure you cite your source. Obviously, that's my obligation as a librarian to tell you. Cite your sources. But then also take a look at the full size of that image before you download it. Because a lot of websites, to improve the speed of a website loading, will take that picture and make it more or less the size of your screen. It'll be like a couple hundred pixels in size, which is great for looking at on a phone or on a tablet. But if you try to put that on your poster, it'll look like this. Or if you try to make it a little bigger, it'll look like a total mess. It will look like mess is what I almost said. OK, so here is an example. I'm crediting myself as the author here. And you can see from these two pictures, one is 3,000 pixels by 4,000 pixels. That's on the right. And on the left is 150 by 200 pixels. Now, those don't look too bad. That's not too different. This is looking at the full page view in PowerPoint. I took a screenshot of viewing the full size of a 3x4 poster in PowerPoint, snapped it, and looked here. But if you look at it at 100%, which is what the actual photo will print as, then you can see that the one on the left is just horribly pixelated and very difficult to make anything out. And if you imagine that printed out on a poster, it's going to look terrible. And just for anyone who's curious, that's a double fish sandwich from McDonald's, which is just one of the best things you can eat if you're a fan of fish. I mean, look at that picture on the right. It looks delicious. OK. So make sure you don't use tiny little pictures on your poster. The internet is a useful thing, but make sure you follow a few guidelines when it comes to selecting the photos for your work. What works great is using photos that you yourself have taken. The reason that fish sandwich looks so good is that I took that photo with my own phone, which has the nice thing about phones nowadays is that they generally produce a really high resolution picture, so that even now if it's fuzzy or out of focus, that's not the camera's fault, that's due to the other aspects of the camera. But photo size, resolution-wise, most smartphone cameras today will work great with a poster if you need to. So how can you find photos that are a good enough size or useful enough for your work? You can use something like Google Images. So I'm just going to pull out of my site here. So here we'll just look at, let's see, let's do a picture of a butterfly on Google Images. So images.google.com. And you'll see there's all these results here. When you go to Google Images search, you can go to Tools. And under Tools, you can select the size and set it to large. And you can also set the usage rights to labeled for reuse. And what that means is that these photos that are being returned are a fairly large size in terms of pixels, but then also they've actually been okayed for use in something like your poster. So you're not just randomly grabbing images off the internet, which may very well be copyrighted. And you can see they're just lovely. And you can see as you hover over any of these results, in the lower left corner, you see there's a pixel count that pops up. So there you see these top results, 3,000 by 5,000, 3,000 by 2,000. Those are the kinds of numbers you want to see. That means that whatever you're pulling in should be a plenty large enough size and will look pretty fantastic on your poster. So if anyone's doing butterfly research in this room, I just hooked you up. You are welcome. So that's Google Images. There's also curated sites. Like for example, Unsplash is one. And that you can see here this background is of an old map, of course. And you see here this little badge. If I click that link, that'll take you to this guy named Nick. And that's because he submitted his photo to Unsplash, which is a curated collection of freely usable images. So anything you find on Unsplash, you can rest assured you can use, especially for us in the education world where you're not making any money off of your poster. You can safely reuse any of this content. And any of the images on here will generally, I would say, the majority of these images will be big enough that you can use them and you don't need to worry about the dreaded pixelation effect. So let's try something like, well, let's see what the butterfly search pulls up here. Again, very similar. Oh, look at that cat and butterfly. Very cute. You can see the size of this thing is pretty nice, and you can download for free. You can download it, and there you go. And that's all there is to it. And you can see the nice thing about Unsplash is that these are photographers or organizations who are deciding to share their content with the broader world. So the least you can do is to give them some credit. And that's why if you look at my presentation here, that has a little badge that Unsplash provides for you. So you could actually include that on your poster, or you could just include a bit of text saying photo by blah, blah, blah from unsplash.com, that sort of thing. Then there's also Wikimedia Commons, sort of part of the Wikipedia family. And they have millions and millions of photos that users have either uploaded or that they've scraped from other publicly available places, and they have really nice, full-featured sites for each of their. So this photo here, if I click on that source link, shows you a photo shown from 2012. That's the Moon, Venus, and Jupiter. That's pretty cool. But it shows you all the metadata, so all the information about this photo. It shows you the permissions here, and you see this one is a Creative Commons license, which means you are allowed to share it and use it as long as you properly attribute the person who created it, or at least the way I linked to the source. That is a totally feasible way of sharing. And then you can see here, the original file is 2,500 pixels by 1,500, which is, again, not a bad size and should probably fit your needs. So those are a few places to go to find if you just are looking for like generic graphics. Now this, for research, it gets a lot trickier because when you're sharing your research findings, they tend to be pretty specific. So how do we go about, well, I'll talk about that in a minute. So how do you actually size your poster in PowerPoint? So I think this is a great time if you want to just follow along. Doing it is definitely the way to kind of get it stuck in your brain. So if you have a computer in front of you, you can open up PowerPoint and just create a new poster, put in a title, something like this. And then and this is the time when you're first starting, this is the time to set the size of your poster. If you wait until you've designed the whole thing, and then it turns out it's 8.5 by 11, and you go to resize it, you're going to have to do a whole lot of dragging and moving around and redoing things and realizing your images look terrible and things like that. So this is the time to do it, right when you're getting started. So if you have your poster right here, if you click the tab up there that says Design, and then way over on the right-hand side, you'll see there's Slide Size. And so if you click that and then click on Custom Slide Size, that brings up this little menu that lets you manually enter in the width and height of your poster in inches. So let's say I want to do 48 inches by 36. And you can set it to portrait or landscape. You see it just swaps those values around. Generally speaking, stick to landscape mode for posters. If you've ever seen someone with a portrait mode poster, so where it's taller than it is wide, you'll probably see a lot of people crouching down or kneeling trying to read the bottom of the poster, and that's probably not something you want people to have to do. So if you click that, then you'll just click Maximize, and now what this is it looks the same to us. Again, this is where it gets tricky, but this is actually 3 feet by 4 feet. And so now if you look at this font, this is 288 point font. So now we're talking. This is something that we can work with. And you see this is where down here, right where my head is over here, but in the bottom right screen you'll see there's a little minus and plus sign, and that's the scale that you're viewing your poster at. So right now we're at 16% zoom. And if I go to this is 100%. So this is, when you're designing something, this is what you'll frequently want to zoom into. You want to get into that 100% just to see, okay, this, especially with your images. So if you drag in, so let's just find, I'm going to try to find the smallest. These are all very nicely sized. Okay, I'm going to save this image as, ignore my face, and then just for illustration purposes, drag it, drop it in. And you see what I mean by the default size of something when you bring it in. If I tried to make it bigger and then go into 100%, you can see it looks okay, but if you imagine looking at that printed out, it looks a bit blurry. So you don't want to, but you see that size is made. At the same time, if you go into something like 400%, generally speaking, of course it's going to look kind of pixely. But viewing at 100% is the way to go. If If it looks pretty good there, then you can see, okay, that's a pretty reasonable size. So generally speaking, actually I'll leave that in there. Generally speaking, if you need to shrink something down to fit it onto your poster, that's a very good sign. That's giving you that extra crispness that we love to see when it comes to printing. I would get into DPI and everything like that, but honestly, it gets too confusing. So really, just look at the number of pixels involved, drag it in, don't drag and make it bigger. And if you do that, you should be okay. So in case you needed a GIF format showing you how to do that, this is going through exactly what I just told you about. So for some more highly academic-specific material, what about tables? I've printed so many posters that have tables from journal articles on them, and they look like, I don't know, like a smudge on my glasses that my toddler put on with their sticky fingers or something like that. Because if you think about it, a table in a journal article oftentimes is about this big. And so you might scan that out, or it might be pulled onto an HTML page, onto a website. And if you just grab that image and include it, it's going to look pretty blurry. So here's an example of an article where I pulled this table, and you can see it doesn't look great. It looks pretty pixely. It just looks. It's where when someone's looking at your poster, if they saw this, they would think, well, it's fine, but it just takes away from the professionalism of your poster. It's what really would knock you out of competition for like a contest for posters. A lot of conferences have poster contests for students, and something like a blurry table could just knock you right out of contention, and I'd hate to see that. But it's not like you can just go and find a higher resolution copy of that exact table. That's generally not how it works. But the nice thing about tables is that they're fairly simple looking graphics, and so what I would suggest is if you need to include a table, just recreate it using something like Illustrator or within PowerPoint or even in Excel. Take the table, retype it, make sure you cite it and attribute it properly, but just recreate it using vector graphics basically, which allow you to size it however you need and include it on your poster. And the really nice thing about that is then you can use the same font that you're using elsewhere in your poster, so that it'll look much more seamless and it'll fit the milieu of your poster. And you have the added benefit of, like, if you feel that it's way too tedious and time consuming to take however much time it's taking to recreate this table, then you should probably reconsider if you should include that table in your poster, because that might suggest that there's too much information being included on there. So that's just something to reconsider, potentially. I wouldn't say if it's a critical aspect of your work, then you might want to take extra time and recreate it. But this gives you a chance to pause and sort of reconsider, do I really need all of this? Could I summarize this data? Could I shrink the number of cells in this table a bit to make things a little more digestible? So here, that's that table. This is recreated using HTML because this presentation is a website, but you get the idea. This is something that would scale up very nicely to different sizes, and it looks nice and crisp and falls in with the rest of your design very well. Okay, now really getting into the nitty-gritty of working with PowerPoint to export. This is where I've found a lot of people get tripped up. When you've created a poster in PowerPoint, make sure you use the File and then Export option to create a PDF. Don't do File, Print to PDF, because I found when you print to PDF, you end up with a 8.5 by 11 poster, and that's just too tiny. It's too little. Yeah. So for example, I'm just going to save this. And so if you want to export it out, you go to File, Export, and depending on if you have the Adobe Suite installed, you might see this Create Adobe PDF option, but here you see I have Create PDF XPS. That's built into PowerPoint, so that you will at least have that. It doesn't really matter which one you choose. There you go. So you create it. You want to leave the size under optimal. You don't need to mess with any of that. Click Publish. We'll just view it in Google Chrome. And there you can see what it looks like. So that, when you use File and Export in PowerPoint, that will maintain that custom slide size, the custom poster size that you created. If you do the print, if you print to PDF, then you will not maintain the size of your slide. It will shrink it down, which is definitely not what you want. Okay, test printing. This is really important. If you once you've printed your PDF, or once you've exported your poster as a PDF, something you can do, and this is probably going to boot me out of Adobe because I'm not logged in. Yeah, it's going to boot me. That's a bummer. Okay, we don't need the option. So once you've, I didn't think about that when I decided to use my computer, but if you use Adobe Acrobat or Reader, so you don't have to have the paid thing. We have access to the Adobe, the full-size Adobe Acrobat through your being part of OSU, but you don't need it. You can just use Adobe Reader. And what you do is you click Print, and then there's a heading called Page Sizing and Handling, and there's an option called Poster. So you can click Poster, and it will take your poster and break it up into normal 8.5 by 11 sheets. And so it'll tile it up and say, so 8.5 by 11, it'll come out to, between 15 and 20 different sheets. And so doing that, you can print out your poster in its entirety, but just using plain printer paper like available here at the library. And I highly recommend it, take the time to actually stick it together. Just use masking tape, well, not masking, just use some Scotch tape, tape it together, stick it on a wall, and then look at it. And that's your best way to proofread. So if you take your poster, that will be the best way to see if the sizing of your fonts is right. It's the best way, and probably one of the only ways that you'll actually catch any proofreading errors. It's so hard to look at a poster on a computer screen and catch all the small little bits of where you might be missing a space, or punctuation is off, or you forgot so-and-so's name. Printing out the full thing and staring at it for a solid half hour, asking your roommate to come and stare at it for maybe not a half hour, just 10 minutes or something, but asking a number of people to look at it is really the only way to catch those inevitable errors that make us all a little goofy. But it's also a way to check out image clarity, because even in black and white, you'll be able to see if a table or a graphic is looking super blurry, and if you need to cut the size down and go from there. And then once you've proofread it carefully, you can check out our website. And so I'll say the best way to find our site is just to go to the library's homepage, which is library.okstate.edu, and go to Search Site in the top right, type in poster printing. Click the search icon, and the first result is the poster printing page, which has all the wonderful guidelines that you just need to review. You'll see there's sizing your poster and there's tips. So a lot of what I've talked about today are actually included on these sub-pages. So that's hopefully helpful. And then down here you see it says submit a print job. You click that and that takes you to the Google form where you will fill out the information. It basically asks you what's your OSU email, what department are you in, are you an undergrad, a grad, faculty, staff, other, whatever. You'll upload your file as part of the form. So it needs to be a PDF or ideally a PDF, that's best. We can also print TIFFs, we can print JPEGs, but PDF is definitely usually the best way to go. I lost my presentation. There we go. So once you've submitted the form with your file, you will receive an email saying that we've received your submission, and then you'll get an email. In that submission confirmation, you'll get a message saying you will get an email again when your print is ready. And when you've printed your poster, and when we've taken care of it, when you've gotten the email saying it's ready for pickup, you can come down to the lower level. We're in the northeastern corner, maps and spatial data, and you'll just walk on in between the hours of 8 and 5, Monday through Friday, say I have a poster, you'll sign your name, and you'll take your amazing poster and go celebrate and dance around carefully with it. And I will say, we have a limited supply of poster tubes available. We really ask that you think hard if you need a tube, because yeah, we have a fairly limited supply. So if you're, for example, we've had a number of people who have conferences in Beijing coming up next week. Those are people who we encourage to come get a poster tube, because if you're going to be flying, especially a long distance, you need to protect that thing. And there would be nothing worse than traveling a few thousand miles and finding that your poster got trashed on the way. I know they also sell the poster tubes in the basement of Human Sciences, I believe. Staples also has them. Okay, so that's all I have in terms of my talk, but I would love to answer any questions we might have from the audience here or from the people online. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kevin. Does anyone else have any questions for Kevin? All right, well, thank you all so much for coming out today. If you'd like to know more about the programs or equipment that we have available here in the library, I'd encourage you to meet with any of us or the staff here at the Lowe Creative Studios. Since this is the last Tech Tuesday of the semester, we have a few extra prizes that we're going to give away today. But don't forget that we'll be back next semester in the spring with some fresh new ideas, some exciting new programs that we'll be showing off. So we'll see you all back here in just a few months. If you have any suggestions for what you'd like to see next semester and future semesters for Tech Tuesday at 2, feel free to tweet us with the hashtag LibTech2s with your suggestion. Right now we're going to say goodbye to our Facebook and Twitter audiences on our live stream. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We will see you all next time.